I open the door and it is everyone from the show.
Wow.
Like people sitting on the floor, the writer's assistant and the editor, Larry David, producers. I mean, just this tiny room had like 15 people in it. And everyone looks at me like, who are you? What is this? Why are you here? And there's a couch, three cushions on it. My editor, the writer's assistant, and then an empty seat. And then Larry David sitting on like a glass table. And I look at him and I go, do you want to sit on the couch? He's like, no, come in. So now I sit down on the couch. Everyone is still looking at me like, who are you? Why are you here? And Larry David is above me. Like I sink down to the couch and he's on this glass table and he's got a little notepad. And he says, all right, we're just going to show you the show. And we just want your opinion at the end. They turn the lights off. And that thing that happens in an HBO show where it goes, it says HBO. And I still remember thinking like, they do that here? Like they put it on. They don't do that later. Interesting. And it dips to black. And right before that song comes on, Larry David falls through the glass table. So the sound of shattering glass just fills the room. Like if you've broken glass indoor, it is loud. And so Larry David falls straight down to the ground. His legs are up in the air because it's this like metal square frame. And so his head is now right next to me. We are staring at each other. And you know, in the show, when he screams, when he's doing that's happening to me. Like I'm all of a sudden in the show. He's just screaming because he's fallen through a glass table. So I reach down, I touch him. He puts his little bony hands on me and I pull him out and I get him up and he stands right in front of me. And the first thing he does is he just whips his shirt off because he thinks he's cut his back up. So I'm looking at Larry David's shirtless body and he's checking his golf swing and just pandemonium. People are screaming. I know he checked he's like, am I fucked up? Like, can I golf? And I'm like, he's checking his golf. And it's probably the closest thing I've ever had to a heart attack because the sound of breaking glass. And then I'm pulling Larry David out of this like metal frame and he's holding on to me. It's just weird. This is a guy that would not say hello to me. And I'm covered in glass. No one cares about me. Everyone's Larry. They're brushing him off. They're checking him for cuts. And then he just has a chair brought in and goes, okay, let's watch the show. And I feel my heart pounding in my chest. And I said, really? Like, shouldn't we just all go home and forget this happened? Watch the show. So they play the show. I think it's like season 4 or 5. It's for those of you who follow Curb, it's the one where Rob, what's his name? He's a comedian. He plays a pedophile who's moved to town. And
Rob Lowe.
No,
I know who you're talking about.
Rob Corddry.
Yeah.
And so watch the show. It all ends. Rob Corddry comes to the Seder and everyone's upset. And the episode ends. And then he asks some very like pedantic editorial questions. Like, did you know that shot of that newspaper? Did you know that was my blah, blah, blah? Like, and we just kind of nod. Like, I just want to get the fuck out of there. And then he asks another kind of pedantic question. Did you understand the relationship in these two shots? And we just kind of went, yeah. And then he went, okay. And then for reasons that I still don't quite understand, but I've loved Curb and I've watched them all. And there's something didn't work for me with the show. It was still in a rough form. And so I remember just picking a point in space because now he's sitting on a chair next to me and I don't want to look at him and I don't want to look at anyone. The room is packed. So I just look at like just a point in space and I say, the Rob Corddry character, you say that he's the pedophile, but you never really know it. So when he shows up at the end, I thought it was going to be a misdirect where he really wasn't the pedophile. And so it just didn't work for me. And then I remember Larry David, he's like rubbing his chin and he's like, oh. And then these two guys on the other side of the room, older guys, are like, no, Larry, like the show works. Don't listen to him. And then Larry David and these two older guys start screaming at each other. And Larry David's defending me. Well, he doesn't think that. They're like, Larry, he's a fan. Don't listen to him. Larry. And then Larry David is screaming at this guy who's wearing pajamas and has super long hair. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I remember him saying, Larry, I can't stay here all night and fix this. I got to go finish this film. And I'm like, who gives this old guy wearing pajamas a film? The guy was Larry Charles, and the film he was finishing was Borat. So,
man.
So,
yeah.
And
you instructed. That's why Borat was so.
That's why. So everyone looks at me, and Larry David is like, yeah, he's right. And everyone looked, even the editor, Larry David's editor, looks at me like, what did you do? So everybody slinks out of there. I go home and tell everyone I've ever known, like, I just touched Larry David. It was amazing. The next day I'm standing in my office, talking to some, people I was working with, and someone taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around and it's Larry David. And I jump because he's touching me again. And B, and B, I was like, oh my God. He's like, what? I'm like, you fell through a table. He's like, when? Yesterday. He totally forgot. Like that's his everyday life. And he says to me, I thought about what you said. And what if we shoot a scene where I tell Cheryl that I saw a picture of him at the post office, and we start riffing for 5 minutes. And I remember these two like employees of the show were looking at me like, introduce me to Larry. Like they loved Larry David too. And for some reason, they disappeared. And we talked about the show for like 5 minutes. And when I went to go watch the episode, he reshot a scene that explained who Rob Corddry was based on what we had talked about. Yep. I found out from the editor, no one gives Larry David notes, not even HBO. So I of course decided to. I was never asked back to another screening. But every day at work, I would see him in the halls and he'd go, hey, how you doing? I go, hey, Larry, it's a good episode on Sunday. So I guess the moral of the story is like, I had conviction in what I believed. And even though Larry David didn't ask for me to destroy his show, he saw value in it. So speak up when you have the opportunity.